My sister Ayesha had a way of making laughter feel like a weapon. It usually happened at family gatherings when everyone was relaxed and least prepared to defend themselves. Someone would ask what I was doing these days, and before I could finish my sentence, she would jump in with a smile too sharp to be kind. She works in healthcare tech, Ayesha would say, stretching the words as if they were amusing on their own, whatever that means. The room would fill with awkward chuckles. Eyes would turn toward me, curious but unconvinced. I would try to explain how I worked with hospitals, how my team built systems that helped doctors access patient data faster, how accuracy and speed could mean the difference between life and death. But halfway through, I would see it in their faces. They didn't really understand, and Ayesha knew that. So basically IT support. She would add, laughing, I mean, no offense. There was always offense. I smiled anyway. Years of practice had taught me how. Correcting her felt pointless, and defending myself felt like begging for respect from someone who had already decided I wasn't worth taking seriously. Ayesha, on the other hand, loved the spotlight. She worked at a well-known corporate firm, dressed impeccably, and never missed a chance to mention bonuses, titles, or the size of her office. Compared to her world of presentations and praise, my work sounded dull and invisible. Even my parents stayed quiet. They didn't mock me, but they didn't stop her either. To them, success was something you could explain in one sentence. My job never fit that rule. What will you do with this job in the long run? My mother once asked gently. I didn't have an answer that fit into dinner conversation. What I didn't say was how many nights I stayed awake fixing broken systems while hospitals waited, how many calls I took during emergencies, how many people I would never meet, whose lives were made safer because something I built didn't fail. Ayesha never saw those parts. She only saw what she wanted, a sister with a job that sounded unimpressive. So I let her laugh. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself my work spoke louder than words, but every joke left a small bruise, quietly reminding me that sometimes the deepest betrayals don't come from enemies, they come from the people who know you best and choose not to see you. If humiliation had a sound, it would be the silence that followed my sister's jokes. Life moved on, and so did I. While Ayesha's career grew, louder office parties, glossy photos, constant updates about promotions, my own world remained quiet and demanding. There were no celebrations for what I did, no moments where family members leaned forward with pride. My work happened behind screens, inside secure networks, and under deadlines that didn't care how tired I was. I worked in healthcare technology, but it was never just tech. It was pressure. It was responsibility. A single error could delay treatment or corrupt critical data. Some nights, I sat staring at code with trembling hands, knowing that hundreds of hospital staff depended on the systems I was building. Patients depended on them too, even if they never knew my name. Ayesha didn't see those nights. She saw me come home late, exhausted, and assumed I lacked ambition. When I skipped family events because of urgent deployments, she called me antisocial. When I refused to talk about details of my job, she accused me of exaggerating its importance. You're always acting like your work is some big secret. She once said, if it's that important, why doesn't anyone talk about it? I didn't answer. How could I explain confidentiality to someone who measured value by applause? The truth was, people did talk about my work, just not at dinner tables. Hospital directors emailed their gratitude. Medical teams requested my systems by name. During one crisis, a senior doctor held my hand and whispered, "You saved us hours today." I cried in the bathroom afterward, quietly. At home, my parents still compared us. Ayesha's salary against my stability, her visibility against my silence. I learned to nod and swallow the disappointment, reminding myself that purpose didn't always come with recognition. Still, some nights hurt more than others, especially when Ayesha laughed again and said, "At least my job makes sense." That was when I realized something painful. I wasn't being overlooked. I was being underestimated by choice, and while she enjoyed the comfort of being admired, I was building something invisible, heavy, and real, something that didn't shine yet, but carried weight. I stopped wishing she would understand. Instead, I focused on becoming so good at what I did that one day, understanding would no longer be optional. The email arrived on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, buried between system reports and meeting requests. I almost ignored it. The subject line sounded formal, distant, something meant for someone more important than me. I opened it anyway. "We are pleased to invite you as a keynote speaker." I read the sentence 3 times, convinced I was misunderstanding it. The Global Health Care Innovation Summit, an international audience, over 2,000 attendees, they wanted me, not my company, not my manager, to stand on that stage and speak about the systems I had built, the failures I had prevented, the lessons learned in silence. My hands shook as I scrolled. They mentioned specific hospitals, specific outcomes, lives affected, my work, described with a clarity and respect I had never heard at home. For a long moment, I just sat there, staring at the screen. Years of being laughed at, questioned, and dismissed rose up inside me, not as anger, but as something heavier, validation I had stopped expecting. I didn't tell my family right away. Old habits taught me to keep good news quiet, to protect it from being minimized. But the summit announced its speaker list publicly a few weeks later. That's how my mother found out. She called me, her voice uncertain. "Is this real?" Before I could answer, I heard my sister in the background. "Let me see," Ayesha said. The laughter didn't come this time. Later that night, she messaged me a single line. "Did you know about this?" I replied simply, "Yes." At the summit, everything felt unreal. The lights, the stage, the quiet hum of an audience waiting. I could see rows of faces: doctors, executives, innovators, people who understood the weight of the work I had carried alone. When I was introduced, they listed my achievements. Titles I had never used, impacts I had never bragged about. I walked to the podium with a calm I didn't expect. I spoke about invisible labor, about systems that only matter when they fail, about people whose contributions are questioned because they don't look impressive on the surface. Halfway through, I noticed the audience leaning forward. When I finished, there was a brief pause, then the room rose as one. 2,000 people standing, and somewhere among them, my sister finally saw what she had been laughing at all these years. The applause followed me off the stage, echoing down the hallway long after I stepped away from the lights. My heart was still racing, but not from excitement. It was relief, the kind that comes when something heavy is finally set down. People stopped me every few steps. A hospital administrator thanked me for a system that had changed their emergency response times. A nurse said my work had given her confidence during night shifts. A young engineer told me my story made them feel seen. Each word stitched together the parts of me that years of doubt had worn thin. Across the room, I noticed my sister. Ayesha stood still, her confidence replaced by uncertainty. She didn't approach me immediately. For the first time in my life, she seemed unsure of what to say. When she finally came closer, the crowd had thinned. "I didn't know," she said quietly, her voice stripped of sarcasm. I looked at her and realized something surprising. I wasn't angry anymore. The need to defend myself had vanished. I didn't feel the urge to list achievements or explain sacrifices. Everything that needed to be proven had already been witnessed. I know. I replied gently, that was all. No accusations, no reminders of her jokes, no satisfaction taken from her discomfort, because the truth was standing all around us. On the drive home, I thought about all the moments I had swallowed my pride to keep peace, all the times I had shrunk myself so others wouldn't feel uncomfortable. That night, I promised myself I would never do that again. Family gatherings changed after the summit. My parents listened more closely when I spoke. Questions replaced assumptions. Pride replaced confusion. Ayesha stopped making jokes about my work. Instead, she asked how hospitals used technology, how systems protected patients, how innovation could be quiet and still powerful. But the greatest change wasn't theirs, it was mine. I no longer measured my worth by whether others understood my path. I didn't need applause at the dinner table anymore. I had learned that meaningful work doesn't always announce itself. It waits patiently for the moment it's needed. And when that moment comes, it speaks louder than laughter ever could. My sister once mocked my healthcare tech job, like it was something small, but in a room of 2,000 people, I learned the truth. What she laughed at was exactly what made me unstoppable.